What if I told you that some of Europe's most powerful empires weren't built by kings, but by families once forbidden to even own land? From behind ghetto walls, these Jewish dynasties navigated centuries of persecution to build fortunes that would literally shape the world we know. But here's a twist. If you look at the lists of Europe's wealthiest people today, you won't find the legendary names you're expecting. The landscape of wealth has shifted. New titans are on top, figures who rose from the ashes of the Soviet Union or harnessed the power of 21st century tech. So, to really tell the story of Jewish wealth in Europe, we can't just look at the past. We have to start with the modern kings of capital, and then journey back to the historical giants they stand on the shoulders of. These are the stories of 10 monumental Jewish dynasties, from the Rothschilds of the 19th century to the tech moguls and metal traders of today. We'll uncover how they built their empires, the persecution they overcame, and the legacies they forged. This is a story of resilience, strategy, and the hidden forces that built modern Europe. We begin our journey in modern London with two brothers who were the very definition of silent power, David and Simon Reuben. With a net worth of over £25 billion, they are consistently ranked among the UK's wealthiest families. Their story isn't one of inherited prestige, but of sharp-elbowed trade and shrewd reinvention. Born in Bombay, India, to a Baghdadi Jewish family, the brothers moved to London with their mother in the 1950s after their parents separated. They arrived with little, living in Islington and attending state schools. This was not a world of privilege, it was a world of hustle. David went into scrap metals, while Simon started with carpets, eventually buying England's oldest carpet company and using the profits to dabble in property. But their astronomical rise began when they pivoted to a place few Westerners dared to tread in the early 1990s, post-Soviet Russia. As the Soviet Union crumbled, its massive aluminum industry was in chaos. The Reubens saw a golden opportunity. They perfected a strategy called tolling. They'd pay for and deliver raw materials to the struggling Russian factories, and in return, take the finished aluminum to sell on the global market for a massive profit. It was a brilliant, if perilous, move. They were essentially arbitraging the chaos of a collapsed empire. By 1995, Transworld was handling a huge portion of Russia's aluminum exports, with global sales topping $8 billion. They became the third largest metal producer in the world. This period, the aluminum wars, was fraught with danger. The brothers navigated a world of emerging oligarchs and faced accusations of involvement with organized crime, allegations they've always denied and were cleared of. By 2000, sensing the changing winds in Russia, the Reubens made a crucial decision. They sold their Russian assets and turned their focus back home to the London property market. With the capital they generated, they began buying up iconic London real estate. Today, their portfolio is breathtaking, including Millbank Tower, the historic Burlington Arcade, and huge swaths of Paddington. They also own data centers, racecourses, airports, and even a stake in Newcastle United Football Club. From scrapyards and carpet shops to the brutal aluminum wars of Russia and back to becoming the quietest landlords of London, the Reuben brothers forged a new kind of dynasty, one built on audacious risk-taking in the modern age. Through their foundation, they now focus on healthcare and education, even endowing Reuben College at Oxford University, bringing their story full circle. If the Reubens represent the power of physical assets, our next figure mastered post-Soviet privatization and the glamour of modern media. Sir Leonard "Len" Blotvinnik, born in Odessa, Ukraine in 1957 to a Jewish family, is one of Britain's richest men, with a net worth of around £32 billion. His journey began in a world that no longer exists. Blotvinnik grew up in the Soviet Union, but his family managed to get emigration visas and he left for the US in 1978. Arriving in America, he earned a master's in computer science from Columbia and an MBA from Harvard. This unique combination, a Russian background, an American passport, and an elite Western education, perfectly positioned him for the collapse of the Soviet Union. In 1986, he founded his investment firm, Access Industries. As Russia privatized its state-owned companies in the chaotic 90s, Blatvinik and his university friend, Viktor Vekselberg, dove in. They acquired shares in aluminum companies that would eventually form Rusal, the world's largest producer. But their biggest score was in oil. Their consortium, AAR, bought a major stake in the Russian oil company TNK. Then they engineered a merger with British Petroleum, creating TNK-BP, a Russian energy giant. For years, Blatvinik and his partners raked in billions in dividends. Then, in 2013, they sold their stake to the state-owned Rosneft for a staggering $28 billion. Blatvinik's personal cut was reportedly $7 billion from that one deal. That deal marked his pivot away from Russia. With his fortune secured, Blatvinik transformed from an industrialist into a global media and tech mogul. In 2011, he shocked the entertainment world by buying Warner Music Group for $3.3 billion. The music industry was struggling, but Blatvinik saw its future. He took the company public in 2020 at a valuation 4 times what he paid. Suddenly, the man who got rich in gritty aluminum smelters owned the record labels of artists like Ed Sheeran and Dua Lipa. His empire grew. He bought DAZN, the sports streaming service often called the Netflix of sport, and invested in hit Broadway shows like Hamilton. Knighted in 2017 for his philanthropy, Sir Leonard has donated hundreds of millions of dollars to institutions like Oxford, where he established the Blatvinik School of Government. From a Jewish refugee to a global power player with a title from the Queen, Blatvinik's story is a masterclass in seeing value where others see chaos. Our third modern titan is a different breed. He doesn't trade in metals or media. He trades in pure information at the speed of light. Alex Gurko, born in Moscow in 1979 to a Russian Jewish family, is the founder of XTX Markets. With a fortune estimated between $12 and $15 billion, he's become the UK's largest taxpayer by building a machine that has quietly revolutionized global finance. Gurko's story is one of pure intellectual firepower. He earned a PhD in mathematics from Moscow State University and moved to London in 2004 to work as a trader at Deutsche Bank. But he grew frustrated with the slow pace of traditional finance. He saw a future dominated not by human traders, but by silent, sophisticated algorithms. So, in 2015, he founded XTX Markets. XTX isn't a typical hedge fund, it's a market maker. It uses its own capital to provide liquidity, profiting from tiny price differences across global exchanges. The company is a temple of artificial intelligence and machine learning, employing an army of PhDs and programmers to build the most advanced trading algorithms on the planet. The results are astronomical. XTX Markets now handles over $250 billion in trading volume every single day, making it the world's largest liquidity provider in the foreign exchange market, surpassing giants like the very bank where Gurko once worked. Though fiercely private, Gurko's actions speak volumes. He renounced his Russian citizenship after the invasion of Ukraine and has donated millions to humanitarian relief. His philanthropy is focused on his passion, math. His charity, Axiom Maths, supports math education, and his firm even launched a $10 million prize for anyone who can create an AI that can win a gold medal at the International Mathematical Olympiad. Alex Gurko is a dynasty of one, built on code. His wealth wasn't dug from the ground or negotiated in boardrooms. It was calculated, modeled, and executed by machines of his own design. We've just met the new faces of European Jewish wealth, titans of property, media, and technology. But where did their playbook come from? To understand the new money, you have to know the old money. These modern billionaires stand on the shoulders of giants. Their stories are even more dramatic, filled with wars, revolutions, and a relentless climb from persecution to power. Before we journey back in time, if you're finding this look into the hidden history of wealth fascinating, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the sagas we're about to uncover. No story of European Jewish wealth can begin anywhere else. The name itself is a synonym for unimaginable riches, Rothschild. Theirs is the foundational myth, the dynasty that defined the very concept of global finance. From a cramped house in the Frankfurt ghetto, they built an empire that financed kings, funded wars, and connected the world with a web of gold and information. The saga begins with Meyer Amschel Rothschild, born in 1744 in Frankfurt's Jewish ghetto, a walled-off street where residents were locked in at night. Forbidden from owning land or entering most professions, Meyer started as a dealer in old coins, which brought him into contact with local aristocrats. But his true genius was family. He had 5 sons, and he placed them like strategic chess pieces across Europe. Amschel in Frankfurt, Solomon in Vienna, Nathan in London, Karl in Naples, and James in Paris. From their 5 branches, the brothers created the world's first truly international bank, operating as a single, fiercely loyal unit. Their most legendary moment came during the Napoleonic Wars. Siding with Britain, Nathan Rothschild became the key paymaster for the British Army, masterminding schemes to smuggle gold across Europe to fund the Duke of Wellington. And then came Waterloo in 1815. The myth says Nathan got news of Napoleon's defeat early, rushed to the London Stock Exchange, and pretended to sell British bonds, causing a panic. As prices crashed, his agents secretly bought everything up, making a fortune when the real news arrived. The truth, while less theatrical, is just as brilliant. Nathan's superior intelligence network did give him the news hours before the government. He simply used that information advantage to buy up bonds he knew would soon soar in value. He didn't have to fake a loss, he just knew the future before anyone else. In the century that followed, the Rothschilds were undisputed masters of international finance. They financed the British government's purchase of the Suez Canal, funded Brazil's independence, and backed railways across Europe. Their legacy is immeasurable. They wrote the playbook on global networks, the value of information, and the resilience of a family united against a hostile world. While the Rothschilds were building their empire, another powerful German Jewish banking family was rising in Hamburg, the Warburgs. They never achieved the same mythical status, but their influence on the very structure of modern finance was just as profound. The dynasty's banking house, Warburg & Co., was founded in 1798. For a century, they were pillars of Hamburg society, known for their integrity and scholarly approach to finance. Unlike the flamboyant Rothschilds, the Warburgs produced bankers, art historians, and physicists. Their influence went global at the turn of the 20th century thanks to 4 brothers. Max Warburg stayed in Hamburg, becoming a personal advisor to Kaiser Wilhelm II. But it was Paul Warburg who would leave the most enduring mark. In 1902, he moved to New York. Horrified by America's chaotic financial system, which lacked a central bank, he saw a system ripe for disaster. He began a relentless 7-year crusade, lobbying for the creation of an American central bank modeled on Europe's. He argued the nation needed an elastic currency and a lender of last resort. His ideas were met with suspicion, but after the Panic of 1907 nearly collapsed the economy, people listened. Paul became the intellectual architect behind the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. It was Paul Warburg, the German Jewish immigrant, who provided the foundational concepts for what is now the most powerful financial institution on the planet. He was even appointed as one of its first governors. The 20th century brought immense challenges. The Nazis targeted the family, seizing their German assets. Max Warburg courageously stayed until 1938, trying to protect his community, before being forced to flee. Miraculously, Warburg & Co. was re-established after the war and operates in Hamburg today. The Warburgs' legacy is less about astronomical wealth and more about structural power. They didn't just play the game, they designed the rules. While banking dynasties were reshaping finance, a different kind of empire was being built in Britain, not in banks, but on the high street. The Wolfson family, led by patriarch Sir Isaac Wolfson, transformed British retail. Isaac Wolfson's story is a classic rags-to-riches tale. Born in Glasgow in 1917 to Orthodox Jewish immigrants from Lithuania, his father was a cabinet maker who fled the pogroms. Isaac left school at 14 and started as a traveling salesman. His big break came when he joined Great Universal Stores, a small mail-order company. With relentless ambition, Wolfson rose to managing director by 1932. He saw the huge potential of hire purchase, letting customers buy goods on credit and pay in small weekly installments. In an era when few had savings, this was a revolutionary concept that unlocked a massive new market. With Wolfson at the helm, GUS didn't just grow, it exploded. He went on an acquisition spree, buying hundreds of undervalued retail and manufacturing businesses and turning them around. By the post-war era, GUS was a retail behemoth that sold everything from furniture to clothing. Isaac Wolfson became one of Britain's most powerful businessmen, but his legacy extends beyond that. A devout Jew, he was also one of the 20th century's greatest philanthropists. In 1955, he established the Wolfson Foundation, endowing it with a huge portion of his fortune. The foundation has since given away hundreds of millions of pounds to health, education, and youth causes. Wolfson College at Oxford and Wolfson College at Cambridge both bear his name. The family's business empire was eventually broken up, but their impact is indelible. They didn't just sell products, they changed how Britain shopped and then reinvested their fortune back into society. Our next dynasty built its empire not from gold, but from concrete, steel, and audacious vision. The Reichmanns, an ultra-Orthodox Jewish family, became the world's most powerful property developers in the 1980s. Their rise was meteoric, and their fall was one of the most spectacular crashes in corporate history. The family patriarch, Samuel Reichmann, was an egg merchant in Hungary. Fleeing communism and then Nazism, the family eventually landed in Tangier, Morocco, where the sons, Albert, Ralph, and Paul, learned finance. After the war, the three brothers settled in Toronto. They started a small tile business, but their ambitions were greater. Led by the brilliant and deeply religious Paul Reichmann, their company, Olympia and York, moved into property. They gained a reputation for taking on massive projects nobody else would touch and finishing them ahead of schedule. By the early 1980s, they had conquered North America and set their sights on New York, building the World Financial Center. Their success was built on Paul's financing genius and a handshake that was as good as a contract. Then came their most audacious project yet, Canary Wharf. In the mid-1980s, London's docklands were a forgotten wasteland. Where others saw blight, Reichmann saw a blank canvas for a new financial district. He proposed a gargantuan project, the largest in the world, and even offered to personally fund a new subway line to connect it. Construction was a marvel of speed, but as the project neared completion in the early 1990s, disaster struck. A global recession hit the property market, and the demand for office space vanished. Canary Wharf, Reichmann's magnificent vision, sat largely empty. The debt was crushing. In 1992, Olympia and York collapsed into bankruptcy, with debts reportedly as high as $20 billion, the largest corporate failure in history. The family lost almost everything. But the story doesn't end there. Though they lost control, Canary Wharf was eventually revived by other investors and became the thriving hub Paul had always envisioned. Their story is a dramatic reminder that fortunes built on grand visions can be as fragile as they are spectacular. The Guggenheim name is now synonymous with modern art and spectacular museums, but before they became patrons of the avant-garde, the Guggenheims were industrialists who built one of the greatest mining empires the world has ever seen. The dynasty's founder was Meyer Guggenheim, who emigrated from a Swiss Jewish community to the US in 1847. He started as a peddler. His real fortune began in the late 1880s when he invested in two flooded, seemingly worthless copper mines in Colorado. Trusting his gut, he poured more money into draining them and discovered a massive vein of silver and lead. The family's genius was in vertical integration. They didn't just want to dig ore, they wanted to control the entire process, from mining to smelting. Their innovations in refining technology allowed them to process low-grade ores that other companies considered waste. By the turn of the 20th century, the Guggenheims were a dominant force. They first competed with the powerful American smelting and refining company Trust, then simply bought a controlling interest in it, taking over their rival from within. By the early 1900s, the family controlled a huge portion of the world's silver, copper, and lead, from the mines of Mexico and Chile to the diamond fields of Africa. They were the undisputed copper kings. As World War I approached, the family began to pivot. The third generation started looking for a different kind of legacy. This is where the second, more famous chapter of the Guggenheim story begins. Solomon R. Guggenheim, inspired by his artist friend Hilla von Rebbe, began collecting abstract art. His passion grew into a mission, leading to the creation of the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum in New York. His niece, Peggy Guggenheim, became a legend in her own right, championing surrealist and abstract expressionist art from her palazzo in Venice. The Guggenheim name is no longer associated with smelting, but with art. It's a powerful story of transformation, a fortune forged in the earth, then turned into a cultural legacy that has enriched the world. Our journey has so far focused on Western and Central Europe, but to the east, in the volatile Russian Empire, other Jewish entrepreneurs were building empires that rivaled any in the West. Their names are less known today because their fortunes were wiped out by the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Two of the most powerful were the Polyakov family, the Russian Rothschilds of railways, and the Brodsky family, the sugar kings of Ukraine. Let's start with the Polyakovs. The empire was built by three brothers, Samuel, Lazarus, and Jacob, who emerged from the Pale of Settlement, the territory where most Jews were forced to live. Samuel understood that railways were the key to unlocking Russia's economic potential. Starting in the 1860s, he secured contracts to build thousands of miles of railway, connecting the grain-producing South to industrial centers. At their peak, the Polyakovs were not just railway tycoons, they were bankers and industrialists on an imperial scale. At the same time, in Ukraine, the Brodsky family was building an empire on sugar. Led by Israel and Lazarus Brodsky, they built a network of state-of-the-art refineries around Kyiv, making it the sugar capital of the empire. Lazarus Brodsky became a towering figure in Kyiv, pouring his fortune back into the city, funding hospitals, a tram system, and the beautiful synagogue that still bears his name. For a few decades, these families represented a golden age of Jewish enterprise in Russia. But their world was built on a fragile foundation. The assassination of Tsar Alexander II in 1881 unleashed a wave of pogroms and anti-Jewish laws. And then, in 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution swept it all away. The new communist regime seized all private industry. The railways of the Polyakovs and the refineries of the Brodskys were nationalized. Their fortunes were confiscated, their names erased from Soviet history. The stories of the Polyakovs and Brodskys are a haunting reminder of how quickly a dynasty can be destroyed by political upheaval. Lost giants whose empires vanished in the fires of revolution. Our final story is one of loss, rebirth, and an empire built on the simple idea of selling directly to the consumer through a catalog. It's the story of Lillian Vernon, a name familiar to millions of Americans, but her journey began as Lily Manesh, a Jewish girl fleeing Nazi Germany. This isn't a story of a business in Europe, but of a European family whose business became a quintessentially American success story, born out of the ashes of persecution. The story begins in Leipzig, Germany, where Lily's father Hermann Manesh ran a successful business. But with the rise of the Nazis, their comfortable life changed. In 1937, the Manesh family fled, eventually immigrating to New York, having lost everything.
Lily grew up with a powerful drive to rebuild what her family had lost. In 1951, at age 24, married and pregnant, she took $2,000 from her wedding gifts and started a business from her kitchen table in Mount Vernon, New York. Her first product was a personalized handbag and belt. She placed a small ad in 17 magazine and received an overwhelming $32,000 in orders. She had discovered a massive, untapped market. She named her company Lillian Vernon, a combination of her first name and her town. She had an intuitive genius for sourcing clever products from around the world. Her catalogs, which she designed herself, became a staple in American mailboxes. The business grew phenomenally. From her kitchen table, it expanded into a massive public company with annual sales peaking at over $300 million. Lillian Vernon became the queen of catalogs, a self-made female entrepreneur in an era dominated by men. She never forgot her roots, and her first factory was largely staffed by other European immigrants. The Manesh family's European business was destroyed by hate. But from that destruction, a new dynasty was born across the ocean, a poignant final chapter illustrating that while persecution could shatter fortunes, it could not extinguish the entrepreneurial fire that would build new empires in new lands. From the aluminum trade of the 90s to the gaslit ghettos of 18th century Frankfurt, these 10 dynasties paint a remarkable picture of ambition and reinvention. We've seen modern titans like the Reuben brothers and Len Bladovic seize on historic disruption to build fortunes in a single generation. We've watched tech wizards like Alex Gerko rewrite the rules of finance. And we've journeyed back to the foundational empires of the Rothschilds, who turned a family network into a global bank, and the Warburgs, who designed modern central banking. We saw the Wolfsons change how a nation shops, and the Reichmanns dare to build a new city from ruins. We uncovered the lost giants of the East and the inspiring sagas of refugees who transmuted grit into legacies of art and commerce. These families faced down pogroms, financial panics, and world wars. Often outsiders, they used their intellect, family bonds, and willingness to take risks others wouldn't to build empires that shaped nations. So what is the true measure of a dynasty's wealth? Is it the billions on a balance sheet, a number that can vanish in a market crash or a revolution? Or is it the lasting legacy, the institutions built, the art collected, the industries transformed, and the very skylines of our cities redrawn? The names on the list of Europe's richest may change, but the impact of these families is etched into the fabric of our history.